Okay, hello everyone. Today we're going to deal with the chapter La estructura de la oración simple, el sujeto y el predicado by Ángela Di Tullio. This is a very short chapter, yet it has some concepts that are new for you. So I will ask you a favor before I start. I will ask you to forget for a couple of minutes what you already know about subjects and predicates, because what we already know about them is from a syntactic perspective. And now we're going to deal with them from a semantic perspective, a perspective on meaning, okay? So the overview of the chapter, as I said, this is a very short chapter that consists in 4 sections. We're not going to deal with the first one, that is the types of sentences, because this is easy and you already know them. So we're going to get into predicates and arguments directly, okay? So let's start by defining what an argument is. An argument is a referring expression that points to an entity in the extra-linguistic world. So, a referring expression, that is a word or a phrase that, when put into use in actual discourse, right, with certain participants in a certain context, can have the capacity of pointing to or referring to an entity, that is to say somebody or something that actually exists in a real world. So let's try to see if we understand the concept. Let's think of the word computer. So if you listen to me saying computer, or if you read the word computer in isolation, you start thinking, first of all, your head starts processing this sequence of sounds that make up the word computer. Then you think of the meaning, an electronic machine that stores information and uses programs. Then you may think of the parts that make up the computer, the CPU, the monitor, the keyboard, the different types of computers like a desktop, laptop, netbook, etc. And all this information activates unconsciously in your head at the same time. And you can also think and imagine these different types of computers, how they look like physically, right? So this is a word, just an isolated word, like when you find it in the entry of the dictionary. Okay, this is a computer. But let's see what happens when the word computer is actually put into use in discourse. So we have a context, we have two people working together on something, right? And participant A says to participant B, we should answer the online survey. Can you please turn the computer on? And in that particular context, with these two people working together, you know, the word computer acquires this capacity of referring to something in particular in the extra-linguistic world. So you not only, all the information we have seen activates in your head, you recognize the computer, but when the noun phrase, the computer, is put into use, the participants can recognize, can identify this entity in the physical space they are sharing. So that is an argument. That is a referring expression. That's what it means when any word, any phrase, when put into use, can refer to something. If we don't share that context, if the participants don't share their context, their space, their discourse, the word computer is just a dictionary entry, Alexim, that activates all the information I showed you 2 minutes ago. But that's it. It does not have the capacity of referring to something particular, to something unique in the world. Okay, so the computer has its reference in this particular context. Do you get what I mean? So when you listen in that exchange, in that verbal exchange, someone saying to the other, the computer, we know this is the computer we're talking about, and not all the pictures I showed you and that you could have imagined when I uttered the word computer. Okay? Good. So I hope it's clear. Then we move to the predicate. The predicate, and as I said before, I needed you to forget a little bit about what you already know about the predicate, because what you know is that the predicate is, you know, one of the parts that make up the sentence. The head of the predicate is always a finite verb, right? And we really, in general, we associate the predicate with a finite verb, right? Because the head of the predicate is a finite verb. But from this perspective, a predicate can be in any part of speech, a verb, an adjective, a noun, a preposition. That is key in determining obligatory constituents. It determines how many and which arguments are necessary. Okay? It is any word which can function as the predicator of a sentence. So write down the terms predicate and predicator, okay? And we will see them later on. We will see the difference later on, okay? But let's leave them for a while there. So in the case of a sentence like we must use the computer, you see in yellow the arguments, we and the computer. Why? Because they are referring expression. In a context that we may share, we refer to you and I, and the computer, well, a similar case as the previous one. You know, this is a computer that we see, that we have in our physical setting, and that we can identify as being the computer that we are talking about, right? So use, in this case, this is a verb, use selects for two arguments. The semantics of the verb to use to make its meaning complete requires two arguments. As somebody performing the action of using something. Okay? So the verb to use in this case is the predicator of the sentence. But let's see what happens with other words that are not verbs, like intelligent, which is an adjective. So we have a sentence like Mary is intelligent. So in order to identify the predicate or the predicator, we need to strip away, we need to identify first the referring expressions, the arguments. So in this sentence, the only argument, the only word that is capable, that has the capacity of referring to someone in particular in a real world is Mary, right? Because Mary in isolation means nothing, but when we are talking about someone, okay, Mary refers to a woman, okay, that we are talking about. So then we have the verb to be is and intelligent. The verb to be in itself does not require for any argument. So the verb to be does not count as a predicate or predicator. In any case, just in one case that we will also see it later on. So intelligent is an adjective, and intelligent, to complete its meaning, requires a theme, right? Requires somebody that has this feature, that has this quality, this trait of being intelligent. So as you can see, intelligence selects for one argument, in this case, Mary. And if you remember, when we read the definition of a predicate, we said that the predicate is key in determining the number of arguments and the types of arguments. Why am I saying this? Because what happens if we have the sentence, the rock is intelligent? From the point of view of syntax, this would be a grammatical sentence. It has a subject, the rock, and a predicate, is intelligent. The predicate has the head of the subject, the verb to be, and intelligent is a subject complement that refers back to the subject. So far so good in terms of syntax. But what happens in terms of meaning? Remember that this is an explanation based on a semantic approach. So in terms of meaning, does it make any sense that a rock can be intelligent? It does not. It does not at all. So that's why we say that the predicate also determines the type of arguments, okay, of the sentence to be meaningful. So we don't talk about grammaticality, but meaning, right? So in terms of syntax, this sentence is grammatically correct. In terms of meaning, it doesn't make any sense at all, and it is not meaningful, right? Sorry. Let's see what happens with a word like in, which is a preposition. We have a sentence like, my backpack is in the car. Again, let's identify the referring expressions. My backpack is a referring expression. The car is also a referring expression. So we have the verb to be that we said that cannot be a predicator. Okay? So we only have the preposition in. And if you come to think of it, it makes sense because the preposition in requires a somebody or a something to be located somewhere. Okay? So in this sense is that we say that in can be a predicate, a predicator. Okay? So since we say that the predicate determines the number of arguments that it will need to complete and make its meaning, complete, we can speak of the degree of the predicate taking into account the number of predicates that are selected for. So we speak of 0 place, 1 place, 2 place, and 3 place predicates. In Spanish, ceroádicos, monádicos, diádicos, y triádicos. An example of a 0 place predicate is the verb to rain. So to rain does not require any argument. It's not select for any argument. We don't say the clouds rain or the sky rains. Okay? We don't need anything else for rain to have its meaning complete. Okay? You see a symbol there in red because it means that even though the verb to rain does not require an argument, it requires something in terms of syntax, okay? But not in terms of semantics. Then we have 1 place predicate like the verb to work. Okay, I can say I work, so it requires an agent. Can you say I work at university? And then you have 1 argument I and at university argument 2. Yes, you can have that, but that's additional information we include. But for work to have its meaning complete, we only require an agent, okay? Or actually the word works requires an agent, okay? Okay, and with delete, you need someone deleting something or something deleting something, but you cannot have a somebody deleting somebody. So again, the predicator is key in determining the number of arguments and the type of arguments, okay? So the arguments that a predicate selects constitute its argument structure. In turn, each argument performs a semantic, thematic, or theta role, papel temático in Spanish, which indicates the participation of that argument in the state of affairs described by the predicator. So we have several semantic, thematic, or theta roles. You have seen this, for example, when you were in first year, that we were talking about intransitive verbs, and you know, sometimes we can alter the order of the direct and indirect object, but with the addition of a preposition. But we cannot choose the preposition we like. For some verbs, we need to use the preposition to. For some other verbs, we need the preposition for, right? And the selection for that preposition has to do a little bit with the thematic role the constituent has, because when the indirect object is the beneficiary of the action, we need to use the preposition for, but when the indirect object is the recipient, we need to use the preposition to, okay? So you have been exposed to thematic roles without knowing. So we can have agent, experiencers, patients, beneficiaries, goals, sources, locations, instruments, okay, themes. And let's see now different syntactic functions, but same thematic role. So at some point, syntax and semantics, you know, get together, right? We cannot speak of one without speaking of the other at some point. So we have a sentence like, he broke the glass with the stone. So certain syntactic functions are prototypically associated with certain thematic roles. Like, for example, the subject. We prototypically associate the syntactic function of subject with an agent, right? So much so that when we are in primary school, for example, and we are taught how to identify the subject, we are taught to look for the doer of the action. The doer of the action involves agency, you know? So we always associate the subject with an agent, like in the case of he broke the glass. So in he broke the glass, he is the agent, the glass is the patient, the affected patient, the affected theme. And then we have also with the stone, which is the instrument. But you know, this is not a one-to-one relationship between syntactic function and thematic role. They may change, they may vary. So what happens in a passive sentence? If we turn this sentence into a passive sentence, like the glass was broken by my dad. In the case of the glass is now the subject, the head of the subject in this sentence. But this is not an agent. The glass is not doer of any action. It is still the patient, the affected patient of the state of affairs described, okay? And my dad, which is the agent in terms of thematic role, is also the agent in terms of syntax. You see, so we can maybe think that the label agent has been borrowed from the semantic approach by the syntactic one, okay? And another example, the stone broke the glass. In this case, the stone is the head of the subject, and its thematic role is that of instrument, okay? So you have 3 sentences in which the subject has different thematic roles. So with that said, we can say that the subject, the head of the subject, will not always be an agent, as we used to believe.